You are now listening to the highlight reel builder for authors, the Going North podcast. I'm your host, certified self-leadership trainer and author of the best-selling book, Stay the Course, Dom Brightman. And you're going to be getting some goodies today from the guest that's up next. Today's episode is sponsored by the Going North Podcast.com shop. Head over to that wonderful website to pick up some merchandise. We got shirts, hoodies, mugs, t-shirts, flags, notebooks, journals, just about almost everything under the sun, even stickers and buttons indeed for your lanyards and for your decorations as well. And we got multiple designs, advance others to advance yourself. We got the GoingNorthPodcast.com logo as well as outread your competition to outlead your competition. And we even got bags too, so check out the wonderful podcast merch shop and be on the lookout for sales. They got wonderful 35% off sales spread out throughout every single month, so that way you can save even more money, so you can get more bang for your buck, so you can bang out your goals through the inspiration you're going to get today on this podcast. Check it out like a library book, my friends. And today on the Highlight Reel Builder for Authors, known as GMP, the great, glorious, and glamorous, is the Going North podcast, baby. And we got another super special, awesome human for you, courtesy of the mighty podmatch.com. That's right, the PM that's in the PM. That's right, where it hooks up podcast guests with fabulous podcast hosts indeed. And today's guest in particular, he's extra special because he does both, baby. He's both a guest and a host because he's a bookcaster. That's right, folks. He's in the business of immortality in more ways than one, because he's got a best-selling book, a wonderful podcast, and on top of that, he's got even more cream on the top of the cake because he's a two-time TEDx speaker, as well as a keynote speaker, workshop facilitator, and wilderness guide. So let's give it up for Mr. CM himself, Mr. Charles Matheus. How you doing today, Charles?
I should feel like I should be wearing a luchadora costume and coming out with fireworks going off. Thanks for that awesome introduction, Dom. How's your day going?
Oh man, it's going north, always north here.
Yeah. No, I love the name of your podcast, and I love that idea of, being oriented towards north. And I was telling you before we hit record, I just moved from the desert Southwest to this place, Utica, New York, and I've been just really kind of a little unsettled because I can't point north, right away. I have to go, okay, that's east. I can do it if I'm in my office. I go, okay, that's east. So that's north. And it takes a little while. And I'm, it's a learning space, right? It's like I knew exactly how to point north before, and now I'm relearning how to point north again. And if I can just like jump into like what my book is about a little bit, I'm just going to grab this segue. I'm going to steal this interview from you right now. It's like, that's the book, Leadership and Masculinity, Embracing New Strength for Men, is about encouraging men to re-find north, right? To like forget all the crap that we've been told about being stoic, being emotionless, being tough, always beating up on others in order to get a win, power over, all that stuff. That was the north that we were kind of given by this concept of the man box. Well, let's re-find a new north, and let's go to that north, like you say, of rediscovering our ability to generate wins that were shared wins. Power with, can we find power with? Power shared among people doesn't get smaller, it gets bigger, right? The more people who have power, the more power there is. Let's find ways to be more compassionate, more vulnerable even just to ourselves, and kinder to ourselves, instead of beating up on ourselves all the time. So that's what I'm doing. That's the north that I'm reorienting to all the time, and refinding, and hoping that other men will come along and discover that it feels awesome.
Hey, I'm all for it, man. Definitely, indeed. And definitely right about that. It's kind of interesting with the times that we're in, because, yeah, that old model of manhood is like, yep, it's definitely, there's some good parts and bad parts as with everything else, but it's like the emotionless piece. It's like,
Yeah.
Nowadays, the way things are, it's like, you gotta have an outlet for your emotions somewhere
Right on.
before it ends up in
Absolutely.
the wrong place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And emotions are, we got to have an outlet for them. We got to have an outlet for the so-called negative emotions of anger and frustration and anxiety and all that stuff. So we don't bottle it up and fricking give ourselves strokes and heart attacks and all that other great stuff. But emotions, especially the positive emotions, if we let those out a little bit, those are also, they tell us what we care about, right? They tell us when I'm experiencing joy, when I'm experiencing connection, when I'm happy, I'm like, okay, I'm pointed toward my north, right? To keep going with that metaphor, like, okay, that's important. That's obviously important to me because I'm feeling positive about it. So let's keep doing that. If we just suppress all of our emotions, including our positive ones, we're just rudderless, man. And that's what lets people manipulate us. That's what gets us into codependent relationships. That's what gets us stuck with toxic bosses and toxic workplaces. But when we actually have access to who we really are emotionally, that means that we have access to what our values are, what our authenticity is, who we really are as men. And then we can take some action, right? Then we can, instead of sitting around stewing in it, we can actually take some action and create a life that's meaningful for us, create a relationship that's better for us with our loved ones, create a parenting style that works better for our kids. Yeah, it's, I totally admit that my book is like totally Pollyanna, optimistic, maybe even naive. Like all you got to do is step out of the man box and your life will be better. And it takes a lot of work, but it is true. Once you can get away from those old norms that have held us back, there's a lot of freedom and a lot of authenticity on offer out there.
Ah, there you go. That genuine authenticity right there,
Yeah.
indeed.
Yeah.
That's right, indeed. So, my goodness, my goodness. So, since it's your first time on the show, I usually try to get a bit of the backstory of the guest before folks even listen even more, so that way they have an idea of where you're coming from. Because I'm sure you didn't wake up with the guru status where you are today. I'm
Right.
sure there were some rocks you had to dodge and jump across rivers
Yeah.
to get to where you are today.
Yeah. I failed forward multiple times. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a little bit about me. I grew up in a tiny town in Arizona and had this, beautiful opportunity to go to school out here and go to an Ivy League school but fell in with a bunch of rock climbers. Was literally having lunch one day at the dining hall, hearing these guys next to me talking about rock climbing, and I was brave enough to say, "Hey, let's do some of that." And I ended up with an early career in outdoor leadership. So as an undergrad, I got to do peer leadership and teach other undergraduates how to rock climb, how to backpack, how to canoe, kayak, mountain bike, do long mountaineering expeditions. And that became my formative introduction to leadership. And in the wilderness, as you can imagine, leadership is always shared, right? There's got to be more than one leader out there, so that if you and I are a leader team, Dom, and you like break your ankle, there's somebody who can rally and get us all out, right? Which means that you and I as leaders have to have a bunch of training on communication and listening and shared leadership and that power so that we're not butting heads and competing in front of the students, because we need them to trust us. So we got to have our crap together, right? So I learned how to share. I learned how to collaborate. I learned how to be clear with my emotions and needs. I learned how to work with individuals who were undergoing some pretty stressful stuff, whether it was they were scared out of their wits 50, 100 feet up on a rock face, or they were fighting with their tent mate about what to have for dinner, or they were just overwhelmed with being in the Rocky Mountains or in the Grand Canyon or whatever. So I got to be with thousands of people over the course of my career who were learning deeply in a soulful way, sometimes in a spiritual way, in an emotional way. So I learned that leadership and teaching and mentoring is not just about the brain, right? I learned it's about the whole body, heart, spirit, gut, muscles, blood, all of that. And then I started bringing that into corporate development, into ropes course programs, into team development programs, bringing that same sense of shared leadership, collaboration, listening, the whole person, whole spirit, whole body. Let's bring all of ourselves to leadership. And as you know, leadership is the most complex human endeavor or interaction that we have, maybe besides parenting, right? Parenting's even crazier, but I think
Oh yeah.
leadership's even harder than being in a relationship. So complex. Anytime two humans or more than two humans are trying to communicate, get on the same page, excel, lift each other up, it's really challenging. So I like coaching people and mentoring people into bringing, and men in particular, bringing their whole selves to this endeavor. And then I ended up focusing on men in particular because 12 years ago I ended up volunteering for the Boys to Men Mentoring Network, which was doing rites of passage and long-term group mentoring for teenage boys in my community. And I discovered or rediscovered all of the ways in which boys got talked out of, myself included, got talked out of emotional fluency, the ability to make friends, got talked out of the ability to cooperate, got talked out of the ability to care for others, to draw a circle of compassion, bigger than just themselves. And I saw how quickly boys and the men who were mentoring them could rediscover that north that was there the whole time. They got pulled off a little bit by how culture wants boys and men to be. But as soon as they were in a supportive atmosphere, man, the masks come off, the barriers come down, and we rediscover how to be, again, that full, authentic human being that we all are meant to be.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm talking about indeed. That's what it's really meant to be indeed, the best selves indeed. That's right indeed, especially when it comes to that rediscovery, because life sometimes throws so much stuff at us we tend to forget sometimes.
Right. Yeah, like, I mean, I'm sure that you have, been in the same boat of like, what were you told to leave behind when you were 5 or 8 or 11? What were you supposed to be a man? What did you have to give up to be a man?
What was I told to give up to be a man?
Yeah.
Man, thinking back, I'm like, man, well, funny enough, I guess cartoons. Funny enough, when I think
Yeah,
about
right.
it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, the cartoons, the brightness, the silliness, the fun. We get told that it's not okay to have fun, and it's obviously you don't pay attention to that rule anymore, Dom. You're like
Yep.
totally fun. So you must have hung on to that somehow. You're not trying to be stoic. You're not trying to be like everybody else, every other man out there, all wrapped up and buttoned down. That's great.
Oh yeah, exactly. Because nowadays it's like there's so many folks buttoned up that sometimes folks will allow themselves to get a little butthurt on certain things that may be big to them but not big to others. And it's like, oh wow, there
Mhm.
may be some trauma that they haven't been able to deal with that probably led to what a lot of folks are going through nowadays on top of everything else. So it's like, hey,
Right.
sometimes finding a way to really stay the course.
Absolutely. And in the 21st century, with all of these challenges, like you're talking about, all of these challenges that are facing us as individuals, as men, and as a species, right? It's like we're looking down the barrel at it. We're, just an all hands on deck effort to make sure that we can get through climate change, that we can beat the inflation, that we can get through COVID, that we can engineer a culture that works for everybody. But again, before we recorded, I talked about how my wife and I moved from this like almost all white community to a much more ethnically, racially diverse community. And that's the future, right? That's no matter what us white folks, and I'll claim my whiteness right now, no matter what us white folks want, that's not what the 21st century is going to look like. So we need to, white men in particular, need to take advantage and remember their skills in navigating complexity, navigating their own internal complexity, navigating the complexity of the outside world, learning to listen, learning to accept challenge, learning to fail forward. And all of those skills are so critical for leadership, whether you're leading in your family, whether you're leading in your church, whether you're leading in your community, whether you're running a business. I know so many men who have hesitated either starting a business or who have hesitated expanding their business because they don't believe they have the skills to manage other people, and they
Mm.
just hold back, or they hire a few people and it's really hard and they don't do well, And so they don't go any further. And all I'm saying is you can rediscover those relational leadership skills, those collaborative leadership skills that you got talked out of. You got told were for girls, and you can, become a more powerful and more charismatic leader.
Like it's definitely true in with the basically the times that we're in now where adaptability is a must. I believe you actually help folks really learn how to be more adaptable by actually taking them in wilderness exploration. So my goodness,
Yeah.
so and I believe that ties in with leadership from your end as well, and that could help other folks as well. So mind sharing a bit on what the outdoor experience has helped you polish as a leader?
Yeah, yeah. Well, let me, if I can answer your question a little bit differently. In the book, I talk about three ways for men in particular, again, to develop to redevelop, to rediscover their skills as relational, adaptable, agile leaders. And the first step is just self-awareness, and just taking the time to ask yourself 3 or 4 times a day. Put an alarm on your phone if you need to. Ask yourself 3 or 4 times a day, what am I feeling right now? Mad, sad, glad, scared, excited? What is it? And even if you can't answer that question, and many men and boys that I work with have forgotten their emotional vocabulary, and that's okay. Even just asking yourself, what am I feeling right now? Even if you can't answer it, builds your emotional vocabulary, builds your emotional ability, and just being more emotionally aware actually creates the ability to be more flexible, more adaptable. When men are not in practice with their emotions, they get stuck in moods. This is something the author Robert Johnson talked about. We get stuck in depression. We get stuck in elation. We get stuck in being grumpy, right? Those grumpy old men that you grew up with, maybe that I grew up with, like they're just stuck in a mood, man. They can't get out, and that makes us just stuck, makes us not as flexible. So the first step is developing some self-awareness, whether it's journaling. I think spending time outside, that's a really important place for me to develop self-awareness. I just, like I said, I just moved to this new location, spent 2 months like working on house restoration and learning all the restaurants in town and everything else. And I found like, I got to get out of here. And I drove north to this river that comes pouring out of the Adirondacks. And like, oh, right. Now I remember how to be fully in my body, not just in my head, actually putting my body in water, feeling warm rock underneath my skin as I got out of the water and laid in the sun, remembering who I am. And that helps me keep a kind of perspective, right? I'm not really that important. When you go out into the woods, you as a person are not really that important. You're small. If you stopped breathing for a little while, you'll just return to dirt pretty quickly. And that can be, scary for the ego, right? We don't want to die. We don't want to be not important. But if you're the leader of a diverse, agile organization, or even just your family, if all you're working on is how to be important, what's that going to get you?
Mm.
Your employees are going to call you a toxic boss. Your wife or partner is going to kind of call you a selfish bully. Your kids are going to say you're distant and self-absorbed. So if you think you're all that, go for some walks out in the woods. Take a look up at the night sky every now and then and realize how small and unimportant you are, but still miraculous, man. We're all miraculous. We're all childs of the universe made of the stuff from exploding stars. So both are true at the same time, right? And that's what I like working with men and male leaders on in particular, like developing that ego that's the right size. So self-awareness, getting your ego into the right size, developing awareness about other people, and um, then taking step two is really about taking concrete action. Or sorry, yeah, step two is about, oh no, sorry, step two is about asking for help. How can I forget this? I'm a dude. I forgot about asking for help, Don.
Yep.
Right? Men asking for help is just freaking revolutionary.
Yeah.
So far outside of what we're supposed to do as men, to say, I don't know how to do this. I need a mentor. I need help. I need advice. Just by asking for help, we are changing how we show up in the world. And then step 3 is taking some concrete action, putting systems in place in your business that help increase diversity and inclusion, help make it a safer place to work, using check-ins at work so that other people can learn how to be emotionally available, starting each meeting with, hey, just state your name and how you're feeling about whatever project you're working on. If it's a family, I know I interviewed a guy who does high-low buffalo with his family at least once a week. They do a family dinner. High-low buffalo is what was your high point for the day? What was your low point for the day? And buffalo is just like, tell us something interesting that you saw or learned today. What's your high-low buffalo for the day? So at least once a week, his whole family checks in that way and connects around the dinner table. And I did those kinds of check-ins with every level of the organization that I led when I was running a large or a medium-sized nonprofit. We did it with the boys we were serving. We did it with the leadership team. We did it with the volunteers and even the board members, the ultimate leaders of the organization. We did check-ins with them, and then we started training our donors how to do check-ins as well. And they kind of figured out, oh yeah, these guys are about opening their hearts and being present. This is really uncomfortable, but I'll go along with it. But if we can do those things as men, if we can do those things, if we can build that self-awareness, ask for help, and take concrete action, we can change ourselves slowly, carefully. 1 step forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Failing is all right. Making mistakes is all right. Misgendering somebody is okay. Apologize for it. Not being self-aware one day is okay. Just get back to it. But we can do that and support each other. We can change the world, Dom.
Oh yeah, that's right indeed. Changing the world, dude. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. Brick by brick, and
Yeah,
dropped
brick
a.
by brick.
Oh yeah, and dropped a lot of good stuff right there in there too, man. Like my goodness, man's been dropping some gems indeed, helping folks leave with a jewelry store. Because one of the major things that sticked out is just the sometimes the ego gets in the way where it's like, oh yeah, I'm a guy, I got this all taken care of. I don't need to ask for no help at all. It's
Right.
like drop the ego enough to realize, oh, I need help indeed. And if I'm not mistaken, actually happened with you in your corporate career one time when you got promoted and they actually had to get an executive coach for you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I ended up in the dreaded special board meeting. You never want to be, if you're executive director, you do not want to be called to a special board meeting. Yeah, I had been promoted to executive director and just scared. I was so scared, Dom. I was just so sure that I was going to fail. I knew that I didn't have a bunch of skills, and I just focused on the technical skills. I focused on, well, I better really learn how to budget. I better really learn how to do financial planning. I better learn how to do accounting, all of it, and fundraising, and all this technical stuff. And I forgot all of the relational leadership skills that I'd learned in the backcountry, up and down the mountains, in and out of the canyons. And I started doing things like micromanaging my employees and like fighting with my program director about his grammar on his board reports. Like that was all important to me because I cared about how I looked. Right, it was my ego was in the way. He made me look bad, quote unquote, by using poor grammar. And I alienated all of these volunteers who had been my allies. I alienated my staff. And yeah, my board said, this isn't all right. And I was lucky enough that they were invested enough in me that they got me an executive coach. I didn't ask for help. I got forced to go to help. But once I got there, I grabbed it with both hands. And a lot of what we did initially with that executive coach was this ego work. He asked me to imagine my death and to write my own eulogy and to imagine what all of the people who I loved and cared for and served, what I wanted them to say about me at the service, right? Like, what do you want them to say? Do you want them to say, well, he was a micromanaging son of a, or do you want him to say, wow, he was so supportive, he was such a mentor for me, he accepted me how I was and took me even higher, et cetera, et cetera. So I imagined myself dead and imagined what my legacy would be, what I want my legacy to be. And I encourage all men in particular, to do that. Like, what do you want your legacy to be? Do you want to have your kids talk about you in hugely glowing, loving terms? Or do you want them to be like, well, he did the best he could. I'm still going to therapy because of him. Um, how do you want your employees to talk about you? How do you want the planet to talk about you? He cared for us. He made sure he cleaned up his mess. He actually helped, clean up a local river, whatever it was. So that coaching reconnected me to my purpose, reconnected me to a healthier ego. And then, as you alluded to, I had to go back to those employees who I had micromanaged and demeaned, and apologize, say, I'm so sorry. I did not lead in a way that was consistent with my values. I am out of integrity with you all. I've hurt you. I've disempowered you. I've treated you like children. And then the hardest thing was to say, and I need your help. I need your help in being a better leader. I can't do it alone. And the remarkable thing is, and this is why I'm such a big proponent of vulnerability for leaders now, what happened was I was met with support. By being vulnerable and by asking for help, I was met with love and support and care. And then together we turned that organization around. And over the next year, I was able to triple the amount of fundraising I was able to do, which enabled us to triple our reach into the community and serve more boys who needed us, and serve more community members and families who needed us. Because instead of focusing on who was dotting the I's and crossing the T's, I was focusing on my part of the business, which was fundraising. And they were able to do their jobs unfettered, and we were able to collaborate on how we managed this whole unit. And yeah, I go into it in a little bit more detail in the book, but it was really that, if I had asked for help without apologizing, that wouldn't have worked. If I'd apologized but not asked for help, that wouldn't have been complete either. So it's really, I wronged you. I see that I wronged you. I acknowledge it. And I actually need some help getting back in relationship and back on the horse so that we can do this thing that we really want to do.
Good deal indeed. And that was definitely a powerful activity the coach gave you, because my goodness, that is definitely a good one to think about, because it's like, oh, darn. Don't want it to be a celebration session gone wrong. It's like,
Yeah.
here's a
Yeah.
micromanager. Or that
Yeah.
classic meme online. It's like, hey, who's thinking outside the box now, huh, buddy?
Yeah. Yeah. Don't want anybody throwing eggs at the casket. Yeah. And
That's
I
right.
think now that I've got gray in my beard, I got gray in my temples. I think a lot of men my age are beginning to consider, what do I want my legacy to be? And, this kind of realization, like, what? I think I will probably everybody seems to die. So I'm probably going to die as well. I've only got a limited amount of time to create that legacy. And for men in particular, it's really complicated by all of the baggage that we're carrying around gender, around gender identity, around masculinity, around sexuality, around race. So what can we do as men to support one another in making mistakes and getting through them, saying the wrong thing, saying the right thing, and building bridges between folks at different races, building bridges between men and women, apologizing to women rather than getting defensive, right? It's like, so many times you see on Twitter, a woman will post out of anger or frustration with men, and so many men will say, well, not me, or not all men, or you're just a subset of men that do that, and getting defensive. And it's like, well, if you're really not the problem, if you've really never been sexist, if you've really never been misogynistic, if you've really never been racist, then you don't have anything to worry about, and you don't have to prove anything on Twitter. But I'm guessing very few of us could say we've always been perfect. So just being able to listen to what women are saying, to listen to what people of color are saying, to listen to what LGBTQI folks are saying, and if you you'll probably get defensive. I get defensive. That's fine. You don't have to express it. Shut up for a little bit. Keep listening. Notice that you get defensive. Notice that you get worried. Notice that you don't want to be lumped in with everybody else, the bad ones. Of course you don't. Of course you don't want to be lumped in. And just be there with whoever's feeling some pain. Be there with that woman who's complaining about being harassed on a bus. Be there with that gay friend who's worried about their kid being teased at school. Just be there. Don't try and change anything, and don't try and make them feel better.
Yep. Sometimes you just need to listen to folks.
Yep.
That's definitely a game changer indeed, because folks just want that listening ear. Definitely can help a lot of folks really recover, especially nowadays, because a lot of folks feel like they're not being heard. It's like, yeah, it's like more noise than actual silence, it feels.
More noise. Yeah. I agree. And it takes a really charismatic, really centered guy to be able to sit there in that noise and create a space where there's some truth being told, where there's some, I don't like, some people talk about creating safe spaces. I don't coach men to try and create a safe space. I coach men to try and create a powerful space around themselves, and powerful in that everybody can be powerful in that space. So that you can be powerful, I can be powerful, women can be powerful, et cetera, et cetera. And it's not easy. And it doesn't necessarily always last very long. But how can we, with that non-judgmental listening and that curiosity and that open-heartedness and that boldness, create spaces for other people to be open-hearted, vulnerable, curious, and bold as much as they can. We can't create safe spaces for everybody. I can't expect to invite a black man who I just met, whether it's you or somebody else, hey, come to my house, we're having a barbecue. I can't expect that to be a safe space for you. I can hope it would be, but I can create some powerful space between us before I invite you into my space, and create some opportunities for a bunch of learning and growth. I don't know. Does it sound like I'm on the right track there, Dom? I'm actually curious.
Hey, it's definitely interesting indeed. It actually reminded me earlier with the whole power with as opposed to power over.
Yeah. I talk about that's one of the 4 gifts of what I call new strength, right? Win-win, power with, inclusion, and vulnerability. And so many of us were taught that we're only powerful or we're only winning if somebody else is losing.
Nah.
Yeah. That doesn't make any sense, right? And so on this podcast interview, right, it's like we want to make each other sound and seem great. Like, it doesn't, you're not going to win this podcast interview. I'm not going to win this podcast interview unless both of us.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. It's really no win for me if it's an arguing session, and that hasn't happened yet on this podcast, thank God. But yeah, like there's no such thing as really winning. Like if the guest laughs, that's a win. If the guest has a good time, that's really my main goal to have fun with the conversation. If they have fun, that's good. I'm gonna have fun regardless.
Yeah, I can tell that about you. Yeah. And it's the same in relationships and parenting, man. If you're trying to win your relationship, oh dude, you are in for a sad time. And I can't even win with my cats, right? It's like there's no way to win. There's no way to win. They put my ego right pretty frequently.
Yeah. That's why dogs won the man's best friend title.
Yeah, dogs don't care about winning. Just scrub my ears. Just scrub my ears.
Yeah, cats will just come in and be like, hey, buddy, how's it going, human? Oh, you've been nice to me? Hooray, I'll be nice to you for like a week. This is my territory now, baby. You fell for the trap.
I'm sitting on your laptop. Oh, I don't know if the guests can hear or the listeners can hear him now. Munchie, the black cat, is in here saying hello. No, he's very silent. Anyway, yeah. What else can we talk about?
Yes, indeed. So, my goodness, since you've been on a boatload of podcasts, both as a guest and a host, is there a question that you wish you'd be asked more often?
Ooh, I think the question that I wish I got asked more often is, what's fun about this for you, Charles? What's fun about doing this work, writing this book? Why is it fun? Why are you doing it? Why do you keep showing up? So do I get to answer that question?
Of course you do.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm having a blast. I'm having so much fun. Just like I said, the book is really the book and my vision for men and for leadership is it's super optimistic, and it's maybe a little Pollyanna, maybe a little over optimistic, maybe a little naive, but I feel good in that space. I would much rather be it's attributed to Abraham Lincoln, but apparently he didn't really say this. He's like, I'm an optimist because there's no point in being a pessimist or something like that. It's just there's no point in beating up myself. There's no point in beating up on men and just saying, men suck and shouldn't be leaders anymore. There's no, it doesn't get us anywhere. So I like throwing parties, man. I like throwing parties. I love inviting people into a space and like, let's sit around and talk about what's real. So that's why this is so much fun for me. That's why being on a podcast like this is so much fun for me, is we get to create that optimistic party space where anything can happen and people can be, joyful about the potential outcomes. Like, what would it be like if we could make it so that women weren't harassed and insulted all the time? What would it be like if we could have a much more equitable and inclusive environment at work in particular, where people could bring their full authentic selves to work without fear of being judged or demoted or whatever? That'd be awesome, right? What would it be like if kids felt safe in their home because their dads weren't trying to exercise some sort of power over thing on them, right? So, might as well be optimistic, because pessimism doesn't have much of a way forward. So that's just, it's a lot of fun for me.
Yeah, fun on the bun. That's why O comes before P for a reason, baby. That's right indeed.
Love it. Love it.
Well, speaking of O's, if your wonderful book, Leadership and Masculinity, if that book was a food, what would it be and why?
Yeah, I think it would be what comes to mind is pizza. There's multiple layers to the book. Each one is tasty, and it doesn't matter much which layer you like best. Altogether, it's going to be better.
Woohoo! There you go, baby.
Yeah.
That's right
Yeah.
indeed.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other reason it's like pizza is that the book is fairly lighthearted, but it's chock full of specific suggestions. You heard me give a couple about check-ins and some other stuff. So the reader, as they go through the book, can take throughout each chapter, there's an opportunity to stop and either do a little bit of journaling or write down some suggestions or just hit some check boxes of what you want to try, so that each reader is going to end up with their own pizza, essentially, with their own toppings on it, their own customized new strength action plan that they will get to carry out, and toward that authenticity. So I'm just providing lots of options. There's no one way to go about being essentially a new strength warrior, a charismatic, powerful leader who's showing up with compassion and curiosity and openness. There's no one way to do that, right? So yeah, I don't care if you want pineapple. I don't care if you want ham. I don't care if you think pineapple's terrible. If you want onions on your pizza, go for it. If you want the meat lovers pizza, the vegan pizza, whatever it is, you get to build it, and then spend some time eating it deliciously.
Ah, yeah. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. Sorry to hear, folks. That's right indeed. It's the pizza with everything. Literally everything. That's right. But maybe
That's
not
it.
everything.
Yeah. You get to choose. You get to choose. You don't have to put, if you put everything on there, that's not going to be as good, right? That's weird. Anchovies and pineapple. I don't know. But if that's what you want to do, great. Great, great, great.
There you go. The forbidden zone, anchovies and pineapples.
Yeah, right. And like and chilies, pickled chilies. Ooh, no, thank you. That'd be weird.
Okay, yeah, I'll
But I
draw a
don't know.
line
I
on
don't know
that
what
one.
they do. What do you? I don't know what they do down in Baltimore. What do you guys put on pizza in Baltimore?
Well, pepperoni usually, meatloaf is usually good depending on where you get it. Pineapple can be good depending on the
Yeah,
pizza.
yeah.
Depending, it's not my first topping to go to, but it
But
it's
there's no
okay.
there's no like Baltimore style pizza. That's a Chicago thing and a New York thing. That's
Yeah, we're more on the crab side of the game.
right,
Crab
right, right,
cakes.
right. Yeah, 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 yeah. My favorites.
That's right, indeed. Well, hey, this definitely has been a crabby conversation. It's been a cooler than a cucumber conversation. Maybe cooler than 3 cucumbers.
Yeah.
That's right, indeed. So coming down to the magical question that every guest gets to receive, and that is if you're to wake up tomorrow and you're 25 again, but you're still in 2022, what advice would you give to yourself?
Mm. Get help. Build a community. Start building friendships. If you're a man, find a men's group. Don't try and go it alone. It's going to be so much more fun working with other people. um, I got a ton of empathy for young people today, looking at all the challenges, looking at how much climate change is going to disrupt their lives. And yeah, start building community. Find some people you can hang out with.
Woohoo! So you're there, right, folks. Find a community. That's right, indeed. Build one too, brick by brick. That's right.
Mhm.
Maybe join the dark side. Join a cult. I was messing with you. Don't join a cult. Don't do
Well,
that.
that's tricky, right? Like, how do you know? How do you know? And this is a danger for men in particular, right? You start going down the path of like incel or men going their own way or these kind of
Mhm.
negative versions of masculinity. If a bunch of men is saying, yes, come join us, but they want you to be the victim, they want you to be all if it's a white supremacist group, oh, the world is being taken over by people of color, oh, we're such victims, or oh, women are bossing us around too much, we're such victims. If some group is trying to make you, a man, into a victim, you're probably not in the right group. Find a group that's going to empower you. Yeah.
Amen to that. Amen to
Dom's,
that.
for those who can't see, Dom's raising the roof right now.
Yeah, because it's so dark true. It's like that's one of the dark sides of social media. See all these folks, all these different groups. Like, oh yeah, are you a red pill or a blue pill? I'm like, God dang, y'all watch The Matrix too much. Like, dang
Yeah,
of
yeah, yeah,
it.
yeah,
There's a
yeah,
purple pill. I'm like,
yeah,
okay. All right, folks.
yeah.
I'm gonna be straight edge about that one, buddy. Forget the pills. Forget
Forget
the
the pills.
Colts.
Yeah, absolutely,
don't
absolutely.
don't be a victim.
Don't be a victim. Absolutely. We are powerful. Let's find other people who are going to lift you up and find ways to be powerful and compassionate together.
Amen, indeed. The real PC we need, powerful and compassionate. That's right, indeed.
Love it.
That's right,
Love it.
indeed. Yes, indeed. So for those who need to have more power with other people and keep up with your journey and buy some copies of your magical book and share with your friends, family, cat, dog, and penguin, what's the best way for folks to do so?
Awesome. Well, I've created a little landing page for anybody listening with that'll give you access to a free chapter of my book, so you can kind of test it a little bit before you go out and buy it. So go to charlesmatthews.com, and I'll spell that in a second. charlesmatthews.com/go north. And you have to, we'll do a little trade. If you give me your email, I'll give you access to a free chapter of the book. And like I said, you can check it out. So it's CharlesMattheus.com/go north.
Woohoo! Sweet. That's what I'm talking about, indeed. Those specialized links are the best, baby. That's right, indeed. Specialized links are the best, indeed. That's right, indeed. You get to go north, indeed. Get a little taste.
Yeah, yeah,
That's right,
exactly.
indeed. That's right. You get to have some hors d'oeuvres.
Right, right, right. Decide whether you're hungry for more.
That's right, indeed. So there you have it, folks. Click on that link. We're going to put the link to that in the show notes, indeed. So that way you can do just that and keep up with Charles and what he's doing and subscribe to his podcast as well. If I'm not mistaken, you got two of them, right?
Yes, yeah, I've got two podcasts going. One is the Remaking Manhood podcast that I co-host with Mark Green, and we do interviews a lot like this with men who are working, men and women who are working on kind of the front lines of defining and supporting this new healthy masculinity, this new strength masculinity. And we've interviewed everybody from academics to Olympic fencers, silver medalists. And then my other podcast is the one that I do with my wife called the Here Together podcast. And that one, in season 3 and 4, we're working on the question of how are we going to live together sustainably. You've heard me talk about climate change a couple of times, and we are pretty sure, my wife and I are pretty sure, that we can't get through that with a bunch of individual people, that we're going to have to figure out how to build communities that can be resilient, that can support one another. And we also know, as a couple of weirdo introverts, like, being in community is hard. You got to actually talk to people. So what is it that we can do? What is it that we can do to create structures, to create habits of thought, habits of engagement, where we can create and build and sustain those communities that are going to lift us up when a storm hits, or when the river dries out, when, whatever it is that happens, that we can bounce back and be there for one another. So Remaking Manhood podcast, you can find it at remakingmanhood.com. And the Here Together podcast, you can find it here.together.us, heretogether.us.
Woohoo! Sweet. Well, there you have it, folks. The .us in the U.S., baby. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. It's the whole Just Us League, baby. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. So be sure to subscribe to both of those shows. Check them out like a 50 library books, y'all. That's right, indeed. Have a whole stack of them. That's right, indeed. Pilot high, then like 50 Subway subs in their prime, baby. That's right, indeed. That's right.
You keep going, Don. You keep going. Keep riffing, man. You're on it. You're on it.
Yes, indeed. As the Hall of Famer Booker T would say, on like neck bone. That's right. Well, before I go down any other rabbit holes, any parting words before we close up shop?
No, man, I just want to thank you for this, for all the energy you put into this podcast and into this episode. And thank you for, being part of a group of men who are, like you said, man, going north and making it happen for themselves and each other.
How's it going, my friend? I'm so glad you made it to the end. That shows that you are an uncommon finisher, and I am so grateful for you sharing your ears, your attention, and your time to this wonderful podcast to do something that'll take yourself to the next level. And for everybody else involved in this wonderful program, share it with at least 3 people in your network, so that way more folks can not only catch the fire that is on this podcast, but can also be inspired to be their best.